Domnilor miniștri, doamnelor și domnilor, mă bucur foarte mult că Guvernul României găzduiește această activitate bilaterală deosebit de importantă, pentru că prezentarea acestui raport final al proiectului Comprehensive Redesign of Licensing System in Romania reprezintă, așa cum spuneam, un prilej deosebit de important pentru a avea pe masă concluziile unei analize și oportune și utilă, pentru că ea vine practic și sprijină toate demersurile pe care Guvernul României le-a făcut și continuă să le facă, astfel încât să putem să realizăm acel angajament de diminuare cât mai mult posibil a birocrației, implementarea digitalizării și, ca obiectiv final, sprijinirea tuturor celor care doresc să investească în România. Mediul de afaceri are nevoie de sprijin. Mediul de afaceri este cel care reprezintă motorul economiei, coloana vertebrală a economiei, și în acest sens, odată ce Guvernul s-a angajat într-un parteneriat deschis și onest cu mediul de afaceri, iată, avem acum sprijinul OECD și vă mulțumim încă o dată atât dumneavoastră cât și domnului președinte Corman pentru atenția pe care a acordat-o demersurilor pe care noi le-am început pentru a deveni membri ai OECD. De la ultima noastră întâlnire și prezența domnului Corman și a dumneavoastră la București, tot aici la sediul Guvernului, iată că venim cu elemente concrete care vin cu adevărat să sprijine deciziile politice pe care noi urmează să le luăm, astfel încât să putem să îndeplinim standardele pe care OECD le cere tuturor membrilor săi. Datele raportului prezentat astăzi sugerează că reformarea sistemului actual de proceduri pentru deschiderea unei afaceri în România și alinierea la exemplele de bune practici va duce practic la o creștere cu circa 4% a produsului intern brut per locuitor și acesta este un argument cât se poate de consistent și de motivant pentru Guvern să demareze tot ceea ce înseamnă mecanism procedural, să punem în practică recomandările pe care dumneavoastră le faceți. Aș dori să subliniez că, practic, ceea ce este cuprins în acest raport face parte și din angajamentele pe care noi le avem asumate prin Planul Național de Redresare și Reziliență. Și aici aș veni doar cu câteva exemple. Este vorba de adoptarea principiului o singură dată, care permite firmelor să li se solicite să furnizeze aceleași informații sau documente o singură dată. Implementarea regimului unic de licențiere industrială, care va introduce aprobarea tacită pentru anumite tipuri de licențe în urma înregistrării electronice a acestora, pe platforma electronică, bineînțeles, și nu în ultimul rând, implementarea integrală a unui punct unic de contact electronic. Iată doar câteva dintre demersurile pe care noi trebuie să le îndeplinim, atât din punct de vedere al cerințelor OCDE, cât și din punct de vedere al implementării PNRR, iar pentru noi reprezintă și un angajament, îndeplinirea unui angajament pe care îl avem prin planul de guvernare pentru a asigura dinamica și ritmul necesare investițiilor și economiei, ținând cont și de situația deosebit de complexă și de complicată în care trăim. Ca atare, suntem oarecum obligați să punem în practică și să accelerăm toate aceste demersuri de debirocratizare și digitalizare într-un spectru cât mai larg posibil. Cum spuneam, practic, dezvoltarea și îmbunătățirea mediului antreprenorial reprezintă un obiectiv în programul de guvernare. Nu peste mult timp vom împlini aproape 6 luni, împlinim 6 luni de când am preluat guvernarea. În această perioadă, mai exact miercuri, chiar pe 25 mai, împlinim 6 luni de când ne aflăm la guvernare și cred că este un moment foarte prielnic să putem să privim și să facem propria analiză, iar de aici încolo, bazându-ne pe experiența celor 6 luni, bazându-ne pe recomandările OECD și a celorlalte instituții cu care am colaborat în această perioadă, să putem să luăm decizii, să modificăm reglementări și să avem un mecanism cât mai funcțional pentru tot ceea ce înseamnă mediul de afaceri și, bineînțeles, măsurile economice atât de necesare, adaptate la situația concretă din zilele noastre. Cred că este de asemenea foarte important, așa cum am discutat înainte de a veni aici în sală, să avem în vedere că reducerea presiunii administrative asupra mediului de afaceri este practic modelul prin care putem să accelerăm procesul de relansare economică și, de asemenea, este modelul prin care putem să asigurăm adaptarea la toate aceste schimbări din mediul de afaceri european și internațional. Se discută foarte mult despre relocarea anumitor afaceri. Este un motiv în plus ca noi astăzi, prin asigurarea acestor facilități lipsite de abundența birocratică, să-i determinăm să vadă în România o destinație atractivă pentru relocare. Este de asemenea important să subliniem că avem nevoie de acel sistem integrat de proceduri administrative, dar nu unul complex și complicat, ci unul simplu și rapid, pe care să îl poată folosi oricine dorește să investească în economia românească, investitori români, investitori străini. Este practic și un moment în care putem să avem o perspectivă asupra ceea ce poate să însemne, ceea ce pot să însemne rezultatele primului trimestru. România a înregistrat o creștere economică într-o situație în care, într-adevăr, inflația a crescut, dar toate aceste chestiuni s-au realizat datorită unui dialog, a unei deschideri și abordări oneste cu mediul de afaceri și mai presus de toate a dobândirii încrederii investitorilor că pot să deruleze afaceri în România pe o perspectivă nu scurtă, ci pe o perspectivă pe termen mediu și lung și prin felul acesta, iată, cu datele din raportul dumneavoastră putem să asigurăm mai multă concretețe demersurilor pe care noi le avem în vedere în acest sens. Încă o dată, domnule Pereira, vă mulțumesc foarte mult și vă rog să transmiteți aprecierea și mulțumirile noastre și domnului președinte Corman, care știu că sprijină alături de întreaga dumneavoastră echipă toate demersurile tehnice pe care noi le avem de îndeplinit, astfel încât, odată cu aprobarea foii de parcurs, să putem să implementăm cât mai repede posibil cerințele și standardele și România să devină membru cu drepturi depline al OECD. Vă mulțumesc!
Thank you very much, Prime Minister, dear Prime Minister, Ministers, Excellencies, Director General Mario Nava as well. It's particularly, I have a particular pleasure being here in Bucharest, launching this official part of the report on completely redesigning the licensing system in Romania. Because I think this is one of the most important projects that I think your political priorities show the fight against bureaucracy and bringing more investment to Romania, national and foreign investment. And I think this is one of the most important projects you can go ahead with. And so I salute you for being a champion of improving the procedures and fighting bureaucracy in your country. I would also like to thank very much the support of not only the Romanian Competition Council, which has been our partner in the past few years, but also in particular the EU Structural Reform Support Program. And in particular, I would like to thank Mario Nava and the DG Reform, because a few years ago when the European Union implemented and introduced the DG Reform Director General, first the sport unit and Director General, I think the purpose was exactly through this, to help countries do comprehensive and good reforms for the country to improve the business climate and to bring more investments and more jobs to the countries. And yes, we are right now facing very challenging times all across the world, but it's exactly the response to these problems has to be through reforms and to be able to constantly improve our countries to deliver better policies for better lives. I would like to start my presentation, if you could share my presentation in which we talked very briefly about the project. I'm not sure if you could put up the presentation on screen, I would appreciate. Thank you very much. Okay, so what is this project about and what way is so important? So we know that business environment business reforms are key to strengthen productivity, resilience, but also jobs of countries. One thing that I think is quite important to say about Romania is that Romania has been a very important success story for Europe. Romania has been converging very fast in the past few years. And what is important is that this continues to go so. However, there are some challenges. This is a graph that shows productivity in terms of GDP per hour. You can see that Romania has improved in the past few years, but this is an area in which can be further improved, and this is why these type of reforms that we are talking here today are so important. In particular, you can see that even though innovation has been rising, highly innovative startups, you can see in this graph, still is very low right now in Romania. And this is why supporting the SMEs and making them more innovative, reducing bureaucracy for their activities is so important so that you are able to improve productivity at the same time that you improve innovation in your country. You can also see that the business environment in Romania, this is a graph that shows product market regulation, and you see that in terms of product market regulation means how restrictive are your regulations. Regulation, you can see that Romania doesn't fare very well, and if you go deeper into this regulator indicator, it shows this is mostly because of your licensing procedures. Starting a business is not a big problem in Romania, registering a business, but a problem is how to license it. And how to license means, what do you need to start to properly start the activity, either in terms of fire hazard or health or environmental or local authority licensing. And this is exactly what we try to do in this project. How can you improve dramatically this figure that doesn't look so good going forward for Romania? And so what we try to do in terms of supporting Romania in addressing some of these challenges, so together with the Competition Authority and with the experts from Romania and the DG Reform, we first took stock of the business licensing to simplify procedures for starting and operating a business. So we did first an inventory of 111 licenses under the responsibility of 43 public institutions. So a lot of public institutions have a lot of licenses as well. And sometimes, in fact, you have not only single license, you have double and triple licensing. So it becomes a bit complicated. But also we try to identify measures to simplify unnecessary procedures that are too burdensome, and also to avoid overlapping. And so what we did was to develop a legislative roadmap. So one of the reports that we're presenting today is exactly, it looks at every single legislation that you probably need to change and how you could change it. So it's very useful, I think, hands-on roadmap, how to proceed with the implementation going forward. So how can Romania simplify its procedures? The Prime Minister already mentioned some issues, but I think it's important to highlight some issues. First of all, this is the inventory. You cannot read it here, but if you look at the report, what it sees that obtaining a license in Romania can be very complicated right now. And so, as I said, while registry is fast, obtaining a license for operating a business is very long and cumbersome. It is estimated that the medium-sized industrial facility, so a medium-sized factory, takes up to 180 days to obtain a license with more than 10 different authorizations required. The other areas that are problematic is the system for building permits. We are not addressing this, but building permits is an area that you also need to address because it's very complicated to get a building permit in this country. The report identified several challenges in the Romanian business licensing system. Among others, the lack of homogeneity between procedures and characteristics of the licenses, lack of consistent taxonomy of licenses and procedures, absence of clear and acceptable guidelines concerning business obligations, long legal deadlines for administrative decisions, and in many cases, as I said, there's double licensing. So sometimes it's extremely complicated to get a license. This is a legacy from the past. And since your government is looking to the future and to improve the daily lives of businesses and people, we salute you, as I said once again, for exactly trying to go ahead with this reform going forward for the Romanian economy. In terms of the main recommendations to improve the business license procedures, this table basically says some of the main recommendations. Let me just stress a few. First, setting up a single industrial licensee will significantly simplify procedures. So we are arguing that there should be only one license. Basically, that license should be, there should be one point of contact. So when a business wants to start, they register their business, then when they go for the license, they submit only one application, and then there's a contact point in the public administration that contacts all the sub-points, all the different areas, so that the entrepreneur finds it very useful and very friendly going forward. Rather than having to go to 43 or more entities over a period of many months to try to start their business, they go to one place where they submit their license and they go ahead with it. So it's a revolution. So when this is fully implemented. Second, it's important to create a regulatory environment that keeps procedures simple and lean. And so put in place what is called an effective silence is consent principle, and only once principle, so that business does not have to repeatedly provide the same information. Something that really people get very upset, businesses get very upset, and is very cumbersome for them, is when they have to do the same procedure over and over again. They have to do the same procedure for Social Security, for finance, for commerce, for economy, for many other health. And so this is usually not very business friendly. So we think this is very important to change this. So the purpose of the single industrial license law that we, I think, by implementing it, is to eliminate or strongly mitigate the cumbersome procedures by offering entrepreneurs a clear legal framework and procedures as expedient, simple as possible. And so what we are arguing is that this legislation could significantly reduce processing time for low-risk activities. So the idea is, what we are trying to promote is you classify industries by different levels of how dangerous they are, how big they are, and you characterize them in 3 types. So businesses that are like chemical industries will be type 1, the most dangerous ones, so you have to be careful in terms of environmental legislations and so on. But most of the businesses are not like this. Most are SMEs, and they are type 2 or type 3. So they are small or medium, and their level of danger is very small. So opening a restaurant or opening a small shop usually should be fast. So by doing this, you will be able to substantially reduce the bureaucratic procedures by doing a single entry point and by allowing for the business to go forward in a much faster way. So, and as I said, this radically transforms the way that the businesses can apply for licensing. So what are the key success factors for implementation? Of course, there will be institutional coordination. So it's very important that if there's a single point of contact, if there's one place where the entrepreneurs go to obtain their license, there has to be coordination between the public administration. So establishing some sort of coordinating body to be able to do this coordination is quite important. Secondly, monitoring system with clear milestones, deadlines, and responsibilities for implementing each action. So what this means is that, and I learned this from my personal experience, I implemented this type of legislation when I was Minister of Economy in my country, which is Portugal. And we wrote a beautiful law, big revolution with licensing issues. We looked much better in the indicators. But 1 year afterwards, they came, say, what is the impact of the law? Well, there was the secondary legislation that had not been introduced. There was an electronic point of entry that had not been introduced. And so the law existed, but nothing happened. So what I will tell you, Prime Minister and ministers, is exactly that you have to pay attention to this. After you do the law, which will be a revolution in terms of fighting bureaucracy for licensing, you have to do the implementation. So you have to make sure that the secondary legislation is there and is implemented, so that you are able to really do the revolution and to implement the revolution. This is quite important. And then a monitoring system. You have to find a way of being able to monitor whether this continues to be implemented or if there's any impediments along the way. But also communicating the objectives. Again, it's very important that the government continues to fight this bureaucracy and communicate it well to the general public to show that this is good for Romania business licensing, business environment, and to bring more investment to the country. I think that's very important to say. What I would like to say, just to conclude, is that we are very committed to continue to support Romania in this reform. We are very honored to partner with your institutions and with DG Reform in this important reform. And I should say that when it's fully implemented, I think Romania will be able to sell itself as a country that is not only friendly for business, but one of the most advanced countries in the world in the fight against bureaucracy and, friendly towards investment. So I salute you, Prime Minister and ministers, and so let's get to work and let's make sure that this law is drafted and then afterwards fully implemented. Thank you.
Thank you very much as well for